How's it going, y'all? This is Drolet. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk with you about how to make crimps feel instantly better. Whenever we think about hard climbing, what most of us intuitively think of is big moves between bad holds. To take that a step further, whenever you think about bad holds, what do you think about? For a lot of us, we think about small crimps. So it's for that reason I thought this would be helpful as a first video. How do you make crimps feel better, since hard climbing involves a lot of crimping? Now, there are a lot of things that make crimps feel challenging to us, and I won't go into a massive amount of detail there. Later on, I'll do a video that really dives into crimping and what makes it unique compared to all other types of holds. But to give a brief overview, some of the things that makes crimping hard is they are much smaller. They in regular holds, so it puts a lot more leverage on the end of your fingers, which means your muscles have to work a lot harder to grab them. Being smaller means you have less surface area, which makes grabbing them and sweating off of them a lot more punishing than with other holds. The small size of them means that we have to be a lot more precise when we go to these holds. Another thing that we have to keep in mind is because these holds are small and it puts a lot of leverage on our fingers, it also means it puts a lot more stress on the joints and connective tissues of our hands whenever we're climbing. Now, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that needs to be paid attention to, because if we don't, it can potentially lead to injury. That means that we can only practice and train on crimps so much throughout the week compared to other types of climbing, which makes crimping really hard. The very last thing that I want to talk about today, and the main reason of this episode of why crimps can be challenging to use, is that our skin has a shocking amount of laxity and looseness to it. Now, that probably sounds like kind of a funny thing to talk about, but if we look at how small crimps can be, we have very little room for error when grabbing them. So if our skin is so pliable that when we grab a small crimp, we slide off of it by up to 5 millimeters every single time, that's the difference between feeling strong on a hold and feeling capable versus just immediately feeling like a crimp is impossible to hold and blaming your finger strength. So the technique I'm about to show you is a way that we can get around that looseness in our skin and how we can essentially take up the slack in that looseness in order to feel stronger and more competent on small holds. So you can try this anywhere. Find a flat surface, place your finger down with a little bit of pressure, and then slide it forward, slide it back, move it around side to side. You can move it in circles. There's so much laxity and movement that happens. And this is what happens anytime you grab a hold. Now, maybe you're not too convinced. A little spot right there, spot right here, and place my finger down, add a little bit of pressure. If I roll back and forth, there's a shocking amount of change that goes on there. I'm gonna go ahead, a little line here. Right. That's how much laxity is in my skin. Maybe yours is different, I don't know. So let's go ahead and see. Now, I'm gonna measure in metric. As much as I love trolling the rest of the world with imperial measurements, if you're using anything but millimeters for edges, that's just chaotic. Now, for me, this is a 5 millimeter change. That's pretty significant. This is a 6 millimeter hold. That size hold, there are people in the world who can hang that with one arm. And that's how much change there is from just your skin sliding around. I've told you what the problem is, which is we have too much laxity in our skin. Kind of rolls forward and backwards. That's an issue. So what's the fix? My solution is rolling into crimps. So what that means is grabbing above them and rolling your skin behind the holds. Another way you can think about this is you're essentially just taking the slack out of the system. Let's say this is an edge. I grab it. My finger can roll forward, roll back. That's a problem. But what if I intentionally overshoot the hold? Grab it a little deeper than it needs to, and then pull back on it. Suddenly, I have no extra slack in the system. I can pull back as much as I want. Now, if you see, my finger can roll forward all at once, but it can't slide out of the hold. If we look at that in terms of a real hold, what that looks like is instead of just jamming my finger in like this, where it can kind of slide in and out however it wants, instead I'm going to intentionally overshoot the hold a little bit. Take the slack out of the system, and now I can pull out as much as I want, nothing. Like my skin could only roll forward if it wanted to, but there's no room for it to move forward because the hold is back there, so it's completely fine. There are a couple of cool aspects about rolling your skin behind crimps or taking up slack, however you prefer to refer to it. One that is really important is that it actually creates this passive kind of fleshy wedge behind a hold. If I just hit the hold like normal, I can roll back and forth. That's, 5 millimeters that I'm losing the second I hit a hold, and slide back, especially if I like jam my finger in like that and then slide back. That's a tremendous amount of loss. However, if I take up the slack, now you might notice something about the shape of my finger here. There's this huge kind of fleshy wedge that's back there. It acts almost as like a stopper. So as I pull, not only is the slack taken up, but there's this huge block of kind of pulpiness that's actually going to passively hold me. Now, this is why for a lot of people, they feel really good on small holds, grabbing them in a front three drag, because basically what it does is they'll hit a hold and then it just creates this really passive kind of wedgy shape with all of their fingers. And so they'll feel really good, and they may feel good below the hold. So if they're hanging down below the hold, it feels good. But the problem is as they get up and that wedge kind of compresses, we'll just slide right off the hold. The next aspect I really like about taking the slack out is that it allows you to get deeper into holds. I intentionally connected these two crimps to kind of show you as an example. With this hold, I can kind of get to the back of it really well. If I'm looking at the Beastmaker edge, if I just jam my finger in, I can't actually get that far. The hold is so in-cut, and the wall behind it doesn't slope away. So even though they're actually pretty similar, and if anything, the Beastmaker is like a deeper edge, the usable surface of the Beastmaker is pretty small. What I can end up doing, and this works great for really in-cut crimps like this, for slots or thin pockets, is by rolling my skin and kind of getting behind that hold, suddenly I can get much, much further than if I just kind of jam my finger in there. You can even see this mark, like the difference in how much skin I can get behind that and how much deeper my finger is versus if I just kind of like wedge it in there. So that's another thing that's really advantageous, and you'll see high-level climbers do this all the time. They'll sit and they'll just almost looks like they're just massaging a hold. And some people mistake this for re-gripping. They will see a climber hit a hold, maybe open hand or like half crimp, and then they pause and kind of sink behind it. And especially high-level climbers do this a lot. And it looks like they're re-gripping, like maybe they missed a hold and they're getting it better. But often they'll hit the hold in one way because maybe the move was big or it was hard to control, and so they hit it in whatever way they can. And once they're in control, they will then take their time and really set their skin behind the hold and get the most advantageous grip position that they can. Another reason that I really like this method for small crimps is that it simply feels better. Having only that much of your finger in the hold, and once again we can kind of look at this pent mark, versus having significantly more. It just feels better. You feel stronger. The hold feels larger in your hand, and that is so significant. In climbing, the role that confidence plays, especially on really bad holds, it can't be overstated. When you hit a hold, if you feel confident, if you're like, oh, I know I can hold this size edge, amazing. Like, you're going to do so much better on that climb than if you hit something, you're like, I don't know, this kind of feels weird and not so great. With nothing else, just the confidence boost that comes with rolling behind crimps is more than worth it. There are two main downsides to rolling crimps. The very first one is that it can often split your seams. Now, you'll see people, especially with really dry skin, walk around with their seams split all the time. And what ends up happening is, because they're taking all that slack out, It puts a tremendous amount of strain right here. Unfortunately, kind of the price you pay to make holds feel better. Sometimes you're going to end up having splits in your seams. Now, there are good ways to heal those, and if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I can create a video around that as well. The other disadvantage is that it just takes more time and more effort. It's much easier to just smash into a hold, grab it whatever way you can, and pull, than it is to hit a hold slowly, really try and roll behind it and get a hold well. It takes more time, it takes more energy, it takes more strength. These are all downsides. So it really just depends. Do you need a crimp to feel better, or do you need to save energy in other places? Of a lot of the skills that I'm going to end up talking about on this YouTube page, this is a pretty easy one to improve at. You just do it. And you can even practice just crimping on the ground. Walk up to a wall, really bury your skin behind the hold, really roll behind it, see how much you can get out of each hold. See what it feels like to just jam your finger in and then actually pull out on the hold. Does that feel significantly worse? Maybe you just have super rigid skin and this isn't even a thing. See how much of a difference it makes. Are there holds where this makes more of a difference versus less? You can take easier crimp climbs and climb them, really emphasizing trying to roll your skin behind every single hold. I don't think this is something that's necessary to do all the time on every hold, but for really small crimps, it can make just the absolute world of a difference to not be sliding out whenever you're pulling on them. Let me know what other things you'd like to see covered on this channel. I have a list of things that I plan on continuing to explore, but I would love feedback. Would you like to see more of this kind of minutia, kind of smaller things? I promise it won't all be just close-ups of hands and talking about skin, but what would you like to see? Are there movement and technique concepts that you feel like aren't discussed enough, or that you just have specific questions on and you would love a video about just for your specific problem? Let me know. I'd love to help. Thanks for watching.